The medical ward on Station Harmony was quiet at this hour, most of the staff having rotated off for the night shift. Dr. Alina Vasquez sat in her office reviewing patient files when the alert came through on her tablet. A new admission to the terminal care wing. Patient. Lady the Ranis of House Valorian species. Valorian age. 28. Standard diagnosis. Crystalline cascade syndrome, stage IV prognosis. 4-6 weeks Alina's breath caught. CCS was a genetic disorder unique to Valorians, a progressive condition where the body's cellular structure slowly crystallized, essentially turning the patient to stone from the inside out. It was rare, incurable, and absolutely fatal, and the patient was only 28 years old. Alina made her way to the terminal care wing, her footsteps echoing in the quiet corridors. She found Lady the Ranis in room 7, sitting up in bed and staring out the viewport at the stars beyond. Even from the doorway, Alina could see the telltale signs of advanced CCS, the faint crystalline sheen spreading across the orange skin of her arms, the way she moved carefully as if her joints were already beginning to stiffen. "Lady the Ranis," Alina said softly, "I'm Dr. Vasquez. I'll be overseeing your care." The Valorian woman turned, and Alina felt her heart clench. She was beautiful, even with the illness visibly ravaging her body. Blonde hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and her violet eyes held a mixture of resignation and defiance. "Just Thera, please," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I think we can dispense with titles given the circumstances." Alina approached the bed, pulling up a chair. "I've reviewed your file. I'm so sorry. CCS is a death sentence," Thera finished. "I know. I have known since I was diagnosed 6 months ago. The progression has been faster than expected." "Is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable?" Alina asked. "Pain management, environmental adjustments." "There is something," Thera interrupted. She looked directly at Alina, those violet eyes intense. "But it is not medical, it is personal." Alina waited, giving Thera space to continue. "In Valorian culture," Thera said slowly, "there is great importance placed on dying fulfilled. We believe that the spirit can only find peace if a person has completed their life's primary purposes. For most Valorians, those purposes are to serve their people, to create something lasting, and to bond with a mate." "I see," Alina said quietly. "I have served my people as a diplomat for 10 years, Thera continued. "I have negotiated 3 major treaties that will benefit my world for generations to come. I have created lasting peace where there was conflict. 2 of my 3 purposes are fulfilled." Her hands twisted in her lap. "But I have never bonded, never married, and now I never will." Alina felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thera, I know it seems foolish," Thera said, her voice cracking slightly, "to care about such a thing when I am dying, but I cannot help it. I grew up dreaming of my bonding ceremony, of finding someone to love, of wearing the ceremonial braids of a married woman, and now I will die having never experienced that." "Have you spoken to your family, your friends?" Alina asked gently. Thera's laugh was bitter. "My family is embarrassed by my illness. CCS is considered a weakness in noble houses, a genetic flaw. They have distanced themselves to protect the family name. As for suitors," she gestured to the crystalline patches spreading across her skin, "who would bond with someone who will be dead within weeks? It would be a terrible burden to place on anyone." Alina reached out and took Thera's hand carefully, mindful of the crystallization. You deserve to have your wishes honored, Thera, all of them. Over the next week, Alina found herself spending more and more time with Thera. What started as medical check-ins evolved into long conversations. They talked about everything: Valorian culture and human history, philosophy and terrible jokes, dreams and regrets. Alina learned that Thera loved music but couldn't play instruments because they required too much finger dexterity. She learned that Thera had a wicked sense of humor hidden beneath her diplomatic polish. She learned that Thera had wanted to travel to Earth, to see the oceans and mountains she'd only read about. And she learned that Thera was terrified of dying alone and unfulfilled. One evening, Alina found Thera in the common area of the terminal care wing, watching a Valorian cultural program on the view screen. On screen, a traditional bonding ceremony was taking place. The bride's blonde hair woven into intricate ceremonial braids, her hands clasped with her mate's as they spoke ancient vows. Thera's face was wet with tears. Alina sat down beside her without a word, and Thera leaned her head on Alina's shoulder. "I just wanted to know what it felt like," Thera whispered. "To be chosen, to be loved enough that someone would bind their life to mine, to wear those braids and speak those vows and know that I mattered that much to someone." Alina's heart broke. She wrapped her arm around Thera's shoulders, holding her as she cried. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Thera's words, about the desperate wish to experience something as fundamental as being loved before death took that possibility away forever. By morning, Alina had made a decision. She found Thera in her room, attempting to braid her own hair with hands that were growing increasingly stiff from the crystallization. "Let me help," Alina said softly. As she gently worked through Thera's blonde hair, Alina took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to bond before the end." Thera was quiet, waiting. "I know this is unconventional," Alina continued, her hands working steadily through the braiding. "And I know we've only known each other for a week. But Thera, I would be honored to marry you." Thera's entire body went still. "Alina, you cannot be serious." "I'm completely serious," Alina said. "You deserve to have this experience. You deserve to wear the ceremonial braids and speak the vows and know that someone chose you. And I choose you, Thera." Thera turned around, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this? You would be binding yourself to someone who will die in weeks. You would have to grieve a wife you barely knew. Why would you take on that burden?" Alina cupped Thera's crystallizing face in her hands. "Because in this past week I've come to care about you more than I thought possible. Because you're brilliant and funny and brave and kind. Because you deserve this and I want to give it to you. And because—" She paused, surprised by the truth of her own words. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you." "That's impossible," Thera whispered. "We barely know each other." "Is it?" Alina asked. "We've spent hours together every day. We've talked about everything that matters. I know your heart, Thera, and it's beautiful. Time doesn't change that." "I'm dying," Thera said desperately. "In weeks I will be gone and you will be a widow before you're 35. "Then we'll make those weeks count," Alina replied firmly. "We'll make them mean everything." Thera searched Alina's face, looking for any sign of doubt or pity. "You truly mean this?" "I truly mean this," Alina confirmed. "Marry me, Thera. Let me be your wife and let yourself be mine, for however long we have." Thera threw her arms around Alina, sobbing into her shoulder. "Yes," she gasped between tears. "Yes, yes, yes." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Alina learned everything she could about Valorian bonding ceremonies. She contacted Thera's family, most of whom declined to attend, though Thera's younger brother, Kale, promised to come. She arranged for a Valorian cultural advisor to help them navigate the traditional requirements. The ceremony was scheduled for the station's observation deck, with a view of the stars beyond. On the day of the bonding, Alina helped Thera into the traditional ceremonial robes, deep purple fabric that set off the orange of her skin beautifully. Then came the most important part, the braiding. In Valorian culture, a bride's hair was woven into intricate patterns that symbolized the union of two lives. Alina had practiced for hours, and now, with careful, loving hands, she created the traditional marriage braids in Thera's blonde hair. When she finished, Thera looked at herself in the mirror and burst into tears. "I never thought I would see this," she whispered, touching the braids reverently. "I thought I would die without ever knowing what I looked like as a bride." "You look beautiful," Alina said softly. "You look like exactly what you are, someone loved and chosen." The ceremony itself was small but beautiful. Kale stood as Thera's witness, tears streaming down his orange face as he watched his sister finally get the wedding she'd dreamed of. Admiral Chen, the station commander, stood as Alina's witness, having pulled strings to make the ceremony legally binding under both human and Valorian law. The Valorian cultural advisor led them through the traditional vows. Alina and Thera stood facing each other, hands clasped, speaking words that had been used in bonding ceremonies for thousands of years. "I bind my life to yours," Thera said, her voice strong despite the tears on her face. "In joy and sorrow, in strength and weakness, until the stars themselves fade." "I bind my life to yours," Alina repeated, meaning every word. "In joy and sorrow, in strength and weakness, until the stars themselves fade." They exchanged rings, simple bands that Alina had chosen, engraved with both their names in Valorian script. When the advisor pronounced them bonded, Alina kissed her wife for the first time, and Thera kissed her back with desperate joy. The small gathering applauded, but Alina was aware only of Thera, of the way she smiled through her tears, of the way her crystallizing hands held Alina's face so gently, of the pure happiness radiating from her. "Thank you," Thera whispered against Alina's lips. "Thank you for giving me this." The following weeks were both the most beautiful and most painful of Alina's life. She moved into Thera's medical suite, spending every possible moment with her wife. They talked for hours, shared meals, watched the stars together. Alina read to Thera when her eyes grew too tired, held her when the pain became unbearable, and loved her with an intensity that surprised them both. The crystallization progressed steadily. Thera's movements became slower, more careful. Eventually, she could no longer walk, and Alina would carry her to the observation window so she could see the stars. But Thera was happy. Despite the pain, despite knowing the end was approaching, she smiled more in those weeks than she had in years. "I never expected to fall in love," Thera admitted one night as they lay together in the medical bed, Alina's arms wrapped carefully around her. "I thought this would be a kindness you were doing for me, a gift to help me die in peace. I did not expect to actually love you this much." "I didn't expect it either," Alina said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I do. I love you so much, Thera." "I know," Thera said softly. "I can feel it every day. You make me feel precious, Alina, chosen, loved. You gave me everything I asked for and so much more." 6 weeks after their bonding, on a quiet morning with the artificial sun just beginning to brighten the station, Thera slipped away. Alina held her until the end, whispering words of love, promising that Thera would always be remembered, that their brief marriage had meant everything. Kale came to help with the arrangements. Through his own tears, he took Alina's hands. "What you did for my sister, stepping up when no one else would, giving her the happiness she deserved, I will never forget it. You gave her peace, Alina. You gave her a complete life." The memorial service was held on the observation deck where they'd been married. To Alina's surprise, dozens of people attended. Other patients Thera had befriended, staff members she'd charmed, diplomats whose lives she'd touched through her work. Alina stood at the front, wearing the ring that marked her as Thera's widow, and spoke about the remarkable woman she'd been privileged to call her wife. "Thera taught me that love doesn't require years to be real," Alina said, her voice steady despite her tears. "She taught me that courage means choosing joy even when you know it will end in sorrow. She taught me that every life deserves to be complete, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply choosing them." Afterward, as the gathering dispersed, Admiral Chen approached Alina. "That was incredibly brave what you did. Not everyone would have stepped up like that." "I was the only one who did," Alina said quietly. "And that's something I'll never understand." Thera deserved so much more than to have to ask a stranger to marry her because everyone else was too afraid or too proud. "But you weren't," Admiral Chen said gently, "and that made all the difference." Alina looked out at the stars, thinking of Thera's joy at her bonding ceremony, the happiness in her eyes during their brief time together, the peace she'd found at the end. "She asked to be a wife before she was gone," Alina said softly. "I'm just grateful I was there to say yes." She touched the ring on her finger, her wedding band, a symbol of a marriage that lasted only weeks but meant everything. And she knew she would wear it for the rest of her life.